Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Congressional reporter Kate Scanlon. Kate, there's been a lot of talk on Capitol Hill after a recent spate of mass shootings about gun legislation. There are some who are hopeful that there may be some negotiations that could work out in terms of passing legislation, but there's also a lot of resistance to what people see as an infringement on the Second Amendment. Where do things stand right now?
So we are seeing more progress on some of these negotiations than we have seen after similar incidents in the past, like in with Sandy Hook. The House did pass a package of legislation this week that proponents said would reduce gun violence, while critics said infringed on Second Amendment rights. That legislation is unlikely to pass the Senate, though, where bipartisan negotiations are still going on in the hopes of proponents of passing some new legislation that they can secure 10 Republican votes and clear that filibuster threshold.
Because you have the 60-vote threshold to clear the filibuster, as you say, so Republicans could block things procedurally, but also you have Joe Manchin. So there are some gun bills that wouldn't even be able to get simple majority support in the Senate.
There are, but even if they could get simple majority support, as you mentioned, Senators Manchin and Sinema remain opposed to removing the filibuster, and so Democrats really do have to work with Republicans here if they want to pass something.
So most likely, whatever the Senate is going to be able to agree on, if they come to some kind of bipartisan agreement, that's going to be narrower than some of the things that have gone through the House. I mean, the House is looking to ban high-capacity magazines, raising the age at which you can buy certain types of weapons from 18 to 21. What sort of things are we talking about as potentially realistic to get through the Senate?
So some Senate Republicans have indicated they'd be open to certain methods of enhancing background checks or incentivizing states to pass so-called red flag laws, which would allow state law enforcement to intervene in concerning situations where somebody's feared to be a risk to themselves or others. One thing that there does seem to be some area of agreement so far between Republicans and Democrats is using juvenile criminal records better in national systems and seeing if that could get implemented. That does seem to be an area of agreement.
Has there been any talk about increasing prosecutions for illegal guns?
That's always part of these conversations. It's hard to know exactly what that would look like under these negotiations, which do seem to be like they're going to be very tailored and narrow. So as we await that negotiation, we'll just have to see.
So the Democratic-led January 6th committee, the committee that's looking into the attack on the Capitol in 2021, has held its first public hearing, a primetime public hearing. What is sort of the state of play? Because there are only a couple of Republicans on the committee. Republicans have been resistant to the investigation and have argued that it's sort of meant to undercut them in the midterm elections. What are sort of the arguments that each side is making with regard to this?
So Democrats are really trying to make the argument that Donald Trump and people around him who worked to overturn the results of the 2020 election should be held accountable for those efforts. And so they're having these public hearings to show what Capitol Police experienced that day, what others experienced that day, in the hopes of kind of recapturing the public's attention on that incident and on what happened around the election in 2020. It's yet to be seen whether that's going to be a fruitful effort. Polling seems to indicate that voters are concerned about inflation, a host of other issues as they head to the polls in November, and so Republicans are casting these hearings as a distraction, as a witch hunt. And it remains to be seen what the public will make of them as these hearings go on.
So obviously former President Trump could run again in 2024. He's talked about maybe doing that, some signs that there's some serious consideration of that. But he's not going to be on the ballot this year. Democrats are, even unrelated to January 6th, trying to kind of put him there anyway, talking about ultra MAGA Republicans and getting people to talk about Trump and to asking different candidates about Trump. So to what degree is this investigation kind of colored by that?
Well, that's an interesting point because there are some early indications that Democrats trying to run against Trump when he's not on the ballot hasn't particularly worked very well for them. The Virginia governor election is a great example of that. And so it kind of remains to be seen if they're going to be able to pull that off. president's parties historically don't do very well in a first midterm election cycle like this.
Right.
And so signs seem to indicate that things are going to go well for Republicans in the fall, but obviously a lot could happen between now and then.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
You can read Kate and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.